Imagine a single nation that stretches all the way from Cairo down to Cape Town. One currency, one military, one single passport for the whole continent. Now, this isn't science fiction. It's a real century-old dream of a United States of Africa. It's an idea that has inspired revolutionaries and icons, but it's also one that, as some sources argue, has been systematically held back by some really powerful forces. All right, let's dive into this epic story of a continent's incredible quest for unity. So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll kick things off in that hopeful era right after colonialism. Then we'll get into the hidden financial wars that some claim have really shaped Africa's destiny. After that, we'll look at the renewed push for unity that's happening right now, explore what a united Africa could actually become, and then finally, we'll weigh that immense potential against the hurdles that are still in the way. Let's rewind the clock back to the 1960s. You've got new flags rising, colonial empires are crumbling, and there's just this incredible wave of optimism sweeping across the continent. But with that newfound freedom came a monumental choice. Should Africa's nations unite into one powerful superstate, or should they stay as a collection of separate, newly independent, and maybe vulnerable countries? And no voice in this debate was louder than Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president. He wasn't just talking about, simple cooperation. He was a deeply passionate Pan-Africanist who believed that political independence without economic and military unity was basically an illusion. His vision was radical, a single continental government, kind of like the United States of America. But Nkrumah's Unite Now approach created this deep, fundamental split. On one side, you had the Casablanca Group. These were the revolutionaries. They wanted immediate political union, and they often leaned towards socialist models. Then, on the other side, you had the Monrovia Group. They were the cautious pragmatists. They were terrified of losing the national sovereignty they had just fought so hard for. They favored a much slower, let's build our economies first approach. So you see, they both wanted unity, but they had completely opposite roadmaps for how to get there. So, who won the argument? Well, in 1963, they came to a compromise and created the Organization of African Unity, or the OAU. But really, this was a clear victory for the slow and steady crowd. I mean, think about it. For nations that had just spent decades fighting for their own flags and their own borders, the idea of immediately handing all that power over to some central government, it was just a non-starter. The OAU's charter put national sovereignty first. Nkrumah's dream of a powerful, unified Africa was pretty much put on ice, and it set the continent on a path of fragmentation for decades to come. But the story of African unity isn't just about political debates in conference halls. Some of the sources we looked at point to a totally different kind of war, a financial one. They argue that powerful global interests have a vested interest in keeping Africa divided and economically dependent. Okay, so to get this argument, we have to talk about the petrodollar system. According to the theory, a deal was struck back in the 70s that ensures all oil is bought and sold using US dollars. This creates this constant, artificial demand for dollars from every country. Then, the oil-producing nations take those profits, the petrodollars, and recycle them back into the US economy by buying American government debt. It's described as like the central pillar holding up US economic dominance. Now, this is where the theory gets really intense. It's often called petrodollar warfare. The sources we've reviewed claim that any leader who has ever tried to break this cycle, say by trying to sell their oil in a different currency, has ended up facing, well, dire consequences. And this brings us right to Muammar Gaddafi. His plan was way more ambitious than just selling oil in another currency. He wanted to create a brand new one for the entire African continent. It was called the gold dinar, and it was going to be backed by physical gold. The whole idea was to break the continent free from Western financial control and basically glue all its economies together. And this wasn't just some pipe dream. People who support this theory point to Libya's absolutely massive gold reserves, an estimated 143 tons. That's a lot. This was supposed to be the financial muscle to make the gold dinar a reality. In fact, some leaked emails from that time even suggest this plan was seen as a direct threat to the established financial order, and that it was a key factor in the decision for military intervention. So after the NATO-led intervention and the collapse of the government in 2011, that huge stash of gold, it just vanished. To this day, its whereabouts remain one of the biggest unresolved mysteries of this entire story. All right, let's fast forward to today, because after being dormant for decades, that old dream of unity is starting to wake up. In a world that's increasingly divided into competing economic blocs, the logic of a unified Africa has never felt more urgent, and you can see new movements really starting to gain momentum. You can actually see the timeline accelerating. Back in 2002, the old OAU got a major upgrade, becoming the much more ambitious African Union. Just recently, the expansion of the BRICS bloc to include African powerhouses like Egypt and Ethiopia signals a huge shift in global power. We're even seeing new regional defense alliances popping up, like the Alliance of Sahel States. And the AU is making a symbolic push for reparatory justice, framing it as a path to true financial freedom. Things are definitely happening. But this isn't just about high-level politics. The inspiration for this runs deep, on a human level. The founder of One Unity Movement tells this incredible story about asking Muhammad Ali what historic event he most wanted to witness. And Ali's answer? A United States of Africa. It was a vision that was sparked in him when he saw the entire continent rally behind him during his legendary Rumble in the Jungle fight in Zaire. So, what's the end goal here? What does this grand project actually look like in the minds of its supporters? Well, the vision for the continent's future is absolutely revolutionary. I mean, just imagine it. One single market of over 1.4 billion people, which is already starting with the African Continental Free Trade Area. Imagine a unified military that could handle its own conflicts without outside intervention. Imagine a continent that's rich in all the minerals of the future, cobalt, lithium, and has endless sun that could just leapfrog the entire dirty industrial age and become the world's first green superpower. And, maybe the biggest deal of all, with a single currency and passport, it would have one powerful voice that simply could not be ignored at any global negotiating table. It would fundamentally reshape the entire world order. And that brings us right back to today. Right now, Africa stands at a critical crossroads. The potential is just breathtaking, but the challenges, the same ones that have stalled this dream for a century, are still very, very real. The stakes just couldn't be higher. On one hand, the potential to become a global economic powerhouse is massive. But on the other hand, the challenges, everything from internal political rivalries to external interference, are equally huge. And there's this real sense of urgency now. In a world that's all about powerful blocs like the EU and BRICS, a divided Africa really risks being left behind. Through all the high-level debates and complex theories, there's one sentiment from our sources that really rings true. It's this idea that all the top-down political efforts have consistently failed. Real, lasting unity isn't going to be born in a fancy conference room full of diplomats. It has to be a grassroots movement. It has to be demanded by the people themselves. So that leaves us with the ultimate question. The dream of a United States of Africa is as old as African independence itself, a powerful, beautiful vision that's been deferred again and again. But as new momentum starts to build from the ground up, could this finally be the moment? Could this be when the people achieve what their leaders never could?